Alright, this is the next video explanation. This time we're going to be covering the NavMesh. The NavMesh is Unity's AI system for navigating an environment. The main components of this are the NavMesh itself, which is the path that can be traversed. We'll see it in a little bit, but that is usually represented as this sort of blue, kind of semi-transparent thing, with the blue areas being the area that can be traversed and the other areas being not traversable. The other component is a NavMesh agent, and the agents are the actual entities that walk around the environment. So usually you'll take one of your components or your objects and you'll attach a NavMesh agent component to it, and that is telling Unity this is a thing that can walk across any of the actual NavMeshes we have created. I'm going to use the same project file as the animation video here, but you could just do this on pretty much any project that has a working model with similar animations, and it should be adaptable. We're just reusing it because why not? So the first thing, we're going to head over to the Animator tab, and we're going to change a few things in advance here. So what we had here is we have the walk, run, and dead animation. We're not going to use run. We're not even going to use dead, really, but I'll leave it there. We can get rid of run for now, and we can rename that trigger over to idle. Then we're going to make a new transition from any state back to the default idle one. And then set that one to have the condition for idle. What this is doing is we're just basically repurposing it, so that way from any point we can go back to the idle state. Because as we get a little further into this, we're going to have the agent kind of navigate around the whole environment, and once they does it enough times, we'll have it go back to being in the idle state, just kind of standing there. So we need some way to get back to that default state here. So the next thing we can do, we can head over to the script, for Skelly Anim is what we had, and we're going to rename it. I'm pressing F2 on my keyboard. I don't know if that would be the same on Macs or not, probably not, but we'll do rename. Call it Skelly Move instead. Give it a slightly more appropriate name. Open it up. And this should be the state that it's in from the previous video. But we're going to erase everything that's in here. And make sure that we rename the actual class itself here to Skelly Move. I'm sure there's probably a slightly less tedious way of doing this within Visual Studio itself, maybe. I'm not sure. I'm not super familiar with it. But this works. So, rename the file and then rename the script. So, we'll actually come back to the script in a little bit. This is kind of just setting up for later. Once we tab back over here, we're going to make the environment. So, this is going to probably seem like overkill at first, but it's going to make for a much more interesting demo by the time it's actually done. The goal is that we're going to have 9 different quote-unquote rooms. And each of those rooms will have 4 cubes inside of it that the agent will be able to traverse around. Where if you pick a point A to point B and there's a cube in the way, the agent will automatically go around it. And eventually, by the end, the center of each room will have an invisible point, and that point will be used to determine basically a coordinate for where the agent can go to. And there'll be 9 of them spread about in the center of each of the 9 rooms. You can kind of think of it as like a system of nodes of sorts, if you imagine like a linked list or something similar to that, where we have these nodes kind of pointing at each other. These won't be pointing at each other, but it'll be a similar idea, where they're just points kind of floating in space that we can just pick and choose from,